Morning YouTube land. Remember to look at this camera, Jim here, this side. I'm going to share this one with you because this is potentially a real popular video. Got an ABS pump, an ABS sectomy to do on an R1150R. Basically, pump has catastrophically failed, and I'm going to show you how to remove the ABS pump and turn it back into a non-ABS model. Pretty simple to do really. There's a little brake pipe fitting. Am I in this man's way? No. There's a little brake pipe fitting, and there's some modifications to do to the plug that goes to the ABS pump to make the brake lights and stuff work. And the brake light switches are the wrong polarity. If that makes sense, I'll explain a bit more when we get there. So the front and rear stoplight switch needs to be changed. The pump's got to come off. There's a bit of bridging of wires to do, and there's a little brake union-y piece to fit. Anyway, so it's the beginning of September now here. It's kind of started to turn into winter, which is a bit rubbish. We've had some nice weather the last couple of weeks, but it really feels like winter's starting to arrive. Corn's been harvested. Right, anyway, enough of that. See you on the job. Okay guys, so we're with the bike R1150R. I'll just give you a quick overview of what I'm going to be doing. So it's got integral ABS, so the ABS pump is buried in the bowels of the bike here, so the tank's going to come off. We're going to get that out of the way so we can get to everything. And then in essence what we're going to do is how to explain this. So with this integral system, the brake fluid circuit from the master cylinder goes to the ABS pump, and then there's another separate circuit from the pump to the caliper. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to connect the caliper directly to the master cylinder and get rid of the ABS completely, same front and rear. And then what you also need to do is you obviously need your brake lights to work, and the way they work with it in this standard configuration with its ABS is the brake lights are switched on by the control circuitry for the ABS pump. So what we need to do is we need to disconnect the ABS pump, and there's a couple of wires that need to be bridged for the front and rear brake lights. And because you do that, the brake light switches that are actually fitted, you can actually hear the little micro switch clicking. The polarity is wrong, so part of the kit you get, and a shout out to Motorworks BMW because they supply the bits normally for these, when I do them at least. You need two switches. You need a front and rear brake light switch, which is a different polarity. Let me just take you over and I'll show you the bits you need. So these are the bits you're going to need. There's a little piece of brake pipe with a couple of unions on it. That's for the front. That's to loop. It'll make sense when you actually see me changing over, but that's to eliminate the ABS pump and sort of transmit the brake fluid from the master cylinder hose straight to the calipers. That'll make sense in a minute. And then there's two brake light switches. There's a new one there for the front, and there's a second hand one there for the back. So shout out to these guys, Motorworks BMW, awesome company. So give them a chance if you want. And here are the part numbers that you're going to need. So there's a splitter there, which is this pipe. There's a switch, and then you get a wiring diagram, which is this. So this is your wiring diagram. It's specific, I believe, to the R1150. If you've got a different model, it's a slightly different wiring diagram. The other thing worthy of note as well is, depending on the model you're doing, if you're doing an 1150 RT, you'll need a longer rear brake line. I believe the brake line off the R1150 GS is slightly longer than the RT, and you use the GS rear brake line off the non-ABS model, obviously. So those are the bits you're going to need. You're going to need two stoplight switches, a front and rear stoplight switch with different polarity to the original ones, and you need this union. And if you're doing an RT, 1150 RT, you'll also need a rear brake line. So the first thing to do, guys, is you've got to remove the fuel tank. Pretty simple on one of these, and most Beamers are the same. There's a bolt this side holding the guts of the tank on. It hooks in on the front, a couple of bits of trim to remove. there's an electrical plug, and obviously the fuel line on two fuel lines under here on little dry brake couplings. Not going to get into the weeds on how to do that, otherwise this video will go on forever like most of mine. So a couple of little breather pipes. There's an electrical connector here. This is typical of most BMWs actually, the number of pipes and the location, and then there's some dry brake couplings. So there's a little metal piece you push here and give it a pull, and out they come. Word of advice, when these go back together, there's a little O-ring here. Make sure you lube them. They either need to be still wet with petrol, or a little bit of GT85 or smear of oil or something on them, because you can snag the O-ring on this little metal clip as they go back together and end up with a fuel leak. So just pay attention to that when they go back together. If you notice, you can't get them the wrong way round. They're handed, so one's male, one's female, so as it goes on you haven't got a concern about getting them the wrong way round. Anyway, two breathers, electric connection, two fuel pipes. Need to undo this Allen bolt now, and then the tank will come off out the way, and we can get to the pump, which is buried underneath here. There's a nut on the back, don't drop the nut. Haha. Right, so this piece now will probably make more sense to you. So what we've got the hose coming down from the master cylinder, down this little thin metal pipe that goes off to the ABS pump, and it comes back from the ABS pump into this union. So all this piece does is it bridges those two, joins those two together. So we're going to disconnect this one and this one, so 11 and 12mm spanners. So we're going to disconnect that one and that one and bridge that connection, and then that takes the ABS pump out of the circuit for the front brake. So that's the first thing to do. It kind of goes without saying really, there's going to be some brake fluid spillage going on, so in my opinion it's best to just catch the fluid at source really, rather than trying to mop it up afterwards. So get yourself some paper towel and pay attention to what you're doing, and collect the fluid as it leaks out, rather than have it dripping all over stuff, and then you're worrying where it's gone and where it's been and whatnot. And the other thing to note as well on this front one here, this is a rubber hose going to it. You can clamp off this hose, stop the fluid running out from the master cylinder this way. Rightio. So we've got these two pipes here going to the ABS pump, so they're going to be redundant. We're going to disconnect the other end of these in a minute from the pump. So we've got these two holes, so that's what this union is for. So this fits in here like so, and that means then the fluid from the master cylinder comes down from the master cylinder and round and straight to the calipers and bypasses the ABS pump, just like that. Oh, and just to piss you off, the fittings are a different size. What's that then? That must be 13mm. So that one's still 11mm, but the other one is a 13, not a 12. Goes without saying that these don't need to be super duper tight. This is soft copper, and there's a lot of force when you swing on a spanner and it's been compressed into the bottom of this fitting. There's a lot of force there, so it doesn't need to be super duper tight. It won't leak. It's more likely to leak if you over tighten it than if you don't tighten it up enough. I don't know what the torque setting is, it's about that tight. Okay, so we'll do the front system now is kind of detached from the ABS system. The only thing we need to modify with the front now is it needs the front brake light switch, but I'm going to bypass the rear brake and then we'll get to the switches and then we'll get to removing the pump. Right, so the rear, what we're going to do is we're going to undo this union. This is the rear brake pipe here. I'm going to undo this union and undo this one. This is the pipe here that goes to the ABS pump. We're going to connect this straight to here. So that's an easy, it just moves from up there down onto there. Use the same banjo bolt, all fits together perfectly. As I said, I think I said earlier on, I think the 1150 RT, the brake line is too short because of the position of the footrest hanger in relation to this bracket. So if you've got an 1150 RT, you're going to need a longer rear brake line. I think the rear brake line on a 1150 RT, the brake line to use on an 1150 RT is actually the GS brake line, which is a bit longer. Anyway, so I'll move that from there to there now. When you undo this, obviously fluid's going to leak out, so you need to be careful and catch it. You don't have to be too precious with these brake lines, you can just bend them up out of the way because you're not going to reuse them, so don't be too worried about bending them or damaging them. They kind of have no use anymore. There's a hex on this fitting for a reason here, to stop, so you can hold this bracket while you undo the union, because they're normally really tight like that. Sorry, did I knock the camera then? Goes without saying, brake fluid is going to leak, so just collect it with some rag so it doesn't go everywhere. The paint on BMW engine casings isn't the best. Best not to add brake fluid to the equation. Right, okay, so we need to connect this hose now onto the master cylinder down there. Pretty simple process that then, really. Just connect this banjo bolt up, wash potentially the brake fluid off there, and then onto the front stop switch. Take my brake clamp off now, can't I? Don't need that anymore. It's just getting in the way. Trying to bleed the brakes later and cursing because it won't work. So follow this wire down. More cable ties to cut. And then on the neck. Okay, now it's buried. Slightly buried behind the connector I just put in. There we go. So that's that. There it is. Wire's long on that. I don't know whether the replacement switch has got such a long wire. Let's have a look. Maybe it has. Seems to be a lot of wire in this bag. Interestingly, and this isn't almost always the case when you're doing this, because this brake light switch isn't technically meant to be on this bike. The connector's different. Wire colour's the same. So I need to cut and solder. Am I getting this in shot? Yeah. Need to cut and solder the correct connector block onto this new switch. But it looks like we've got more than enough length of wire, so it's all going to be fine. The switches look the same, so that's fine. Coolio, so put this switch on now. Easy peasy really. There's a little cover you need to remove to get underneath this master cylinder, and then the switch is held in with a little it's a little machine thread screw, one screw, and there's a little peg that sort of locates it into the right position. A little bit of fiddly, but I'm sure you can deal with it. And then once the screw's done up tight, don't over tighten it. It's a tiny, I think it's 3mm or something like that, so it's a tiny weeny little screw, really easy to damage the thread. And then there's a cover that goes on, this cover here with, it's got 2 little screws. You have to get the wire to poke out through the right little hole, but fairly straightforward. So 1 screw in one end and then 1 in the other. Job's a good one. We're just going to swap over these connectors. Check this out. Not BMW related. Got a new soldering iron. It's got an OLED screen on it. Look at that. You can thermostatically controlled. I tell you what, I like living in the future. Forget the where am I going? Down, not up. Forget the gas soldering iron, mate. This is the way forward. This thing is a beast. It's got so much power, and it runs off a goes up to 450 degrees C, and man, it'll solder some thick gauge stuff. Heats up really quick. You see the temperature going up. It's on a 3S battery at the moment, 3S LiPo that I use for some RC stuff. It'll run on a 4S as well, so I think it'll run from anywhere between 11 and 26 volts or something like that. Anyway, this is the way forward as far as I'm concerned for soldering. It's a beast. Anyway, I didn't tune into what C soldering irons, did you? I'm just going to swap over this connector. Where's it gone? Cut the one off the old plug, solder this one on, tidy the wiring up with some cable ties, and move on to the rear. Oh, shaky hands. You've got to love adhesive lined heat shrink. It should be illegal to buy anything other than adhesive lined heat shrink. It's awesome, get some in your life. That's all I can say. Watertight and strong. The other thing that should be compulsory is flush cut cutters, so you don't leave spiky bits on your cable ties. Cool. Right, the next thing to do, there's no point in boring everybody with it, but I've got to swap this rear brake light switch, which is just on the back of here. Take this footrest hanger off just so I can get to it. Follow the wire up. No, hang on, that's the ABS sensor. Yeah, this one here. Swap that switch and then we'll get to removing the pump. No point in showing you that though, because it's going to be boring. Right, for now, so now for the fun part, physically removing the pump. There's a few things need to happen. The battery's got to be not there. So the pump's held in physically. There's an Allen bolt on each side at the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. They've got to be undone, and so that bolts it to this cradle. We need to. There's 2 little electrical connectors here for fluid levels. So they've got to go. There's the main connector here. So we've got to disconnect that, and then there's 4 brake pipes. So there's an in and an out for the front and an in and out for the back. So when you disconnect these pipes from the pump, you've got to make sure that you catch the fluid, because in a lot of cases, for instance, if I remove the rear one, the pipe is open down here, and I'll introduce air in the top and it will wee fluid out all over the floor. So lots of rag around the ends of your pipes, but it's pretty straightforward to remove. Right, so the electrical connectors are easy enough. You just push the little tab, pull the connector off, and then the brake pipes, excuse me, there's a little rubber boot here that you pull up, and then there's a little metal clip here that you just get a screwdriver in and pull it out, and then literally just a push fit into the pump. It's a bit of a pull and out it comes. It's that simple. And then watch for, as I say, watch for fluid leaking out the other end. And then you've got a kind of, obviously these are a bit of an awkward shape. Bend them out of the way, get to a point where you can get the pump out of the way, and then you've got to sort of straighten these pipes out a bit to wiggle them out through the frame, but one assumes that you're not going to reuse them, so deforming them a little bit isn't going to hurt. So a quick shot of getting this connector undone. There's a big, pop a screwdriver in here, there's this piece that slides out, which is like a, looks like a locking tab if you like. If you slide it all the way out, it pulls the connector up at the same time. Easy as that. There's also a breather pipe here, which goes to the two filler holes for the front and rear brake fluid reservoirs in the pump. You can just disconnect this breather and either pull the pipe, it just goes down onto the ground. You can either pull the pipe out and have it as a spare for something else, or just cable tie it up out of the way, but you don't need to worry about that. It's just a breather. I lied. There's one bolt on this side and the air intake is slightly in the way. Not two. There it is. That is a big heavy lump of metal, fair play. So we'll get rid of that, and we've got to do some modifying of these wires. Right, so the other thing to do, which I mentioned before, is get rid of these pipes. So you need to bend them straight to get them out through the hole in the frame. Try and catch the brake fluid as best you can. If you were feeling really rude, you could just cut them, because you're not going to need them again. But they will come out with a bit of a fight. Ta-da. Right then, now here's the bit that is going to fill most people with dread, and is possibly the reason why you're not going to want to do this yourself, the wiring bit of it. Now there's no need to be frightened, I will hold your hand. Now the only thing I will say is this diagram, I've got to try and film and look through the, just so bear with me, it'll be a bit Blair Witchy. So the only difference with the 850, this here is for what does it say here? It says R1150R and 2000, 2001. Anyway, it doesn't mention R850 on here. The only difference I can find is this grey and yellow is actually a grey and white on the 850. So don't let that confuse you. All the other colours are exactly correct. So it looks a little bit overwhelming, but all we're doing is there's a green wire coming in on that there's a green wire coming in to the ABS unit, and that's an ignition live. We're connecting that ignition live to the front and rear stop switches, so they've got a live to dish out, if you like, when the contact is made. So hang on, let me put my cup of tea there because it's been blown around. So there's a live coming in, which is the green. Now you can test that with your tester with ignition on. That's live coming in. You connect that green, if you follow the wire and diagram, you connect that to the white and the blue and the yellow and the green, and they're, if you like, they're the inputs for the front and rear stop switch, so they're live. When the contact is made, then live is outputted. So if you put the front brake on, there's the front switch. Is it in focus? Focus, you. Right, there's the front brake switch. When you apply the front brake, you've got a live waiting, if you like, in the switch. You put the brake on, white and yellow is outputted, and then that white and yellow connects to the grey and yellow. Oh, hang on a minute, connects to the grey and yellow. But in my case, that's a grey and white, not a grey and yellow. Let me make sure I'm getting that right. No, that's true. It is a grey and yellow. Sorry, it's this grey and black that's different on mine. So it's the tail light bit. The the tail light on the 850 isn't grey and black, it's grey and white. Okay, so live from the green into the two front and rear stop switches, live out of the switches, they both connect to the grey and yellow. So the two lives out of the stop switches, which are, sorry if I'm waffling, but I'm trying to make this easy for you. So the two lives out of the stop switches are yellow and black and white and yellow, and they connect to the grey and yellow. So when you put the brakes on, grey and yellow becomes live, light comes on. Then the only other connection you need to make is, for some reason, the rear brake feed feeds through this ABS pump. So there's a live, the grey and black in is to make the rear tail light come on. That needs to be connected, not to the other grey and black. I was looking for two grey and blacks, but a grey and white. So grey and black to grey and white. Do that, everything should work. Right, let me show you what I've done on the bike. So, sorry, this isn't a nice camera shot like the other one. The battery's flat in the other camera. So you can see how I've got the wires joined. I've just twisted them together. Everything works. So let's do the alarm. Make sure you're in focus. So he says, I'm going to have to blur out that number plate. Rear light is on, so the rear light works, and I've got brake light as well. That's rear, and I can't reach the front, but in a minute, there's your front brake light as well. So that's how it's wired. I'll show you in a second how I tidy this up, but effectively I'm just going to put some solder on these now, so they are soldered together. Waterproof heat shrink over there. Then I'm going to, rather than leave this connection block, I'm going to cut all the wires and heat shrink the ends of them individually, and then put them all in a big waterproof heat shrink tube, so they're all waterproof and all protected, and then just cable tie them up inside here. Anyway, I'll show you that in a second. 380 degrees of chooch. When I say chooch, I'm quoting my favourite YouTuber. A lot of you will know who he is. You could always twist these together and insulate them with an old sweet wrapper. It's another good way of doing it. I'm only joking, obviously. I say that in jest though, but honestly some of the things I've seen twisted together and a sweet wrapper for insulation would be a good job compared to some of the stuff I've come across. Job's a good one. You give them a squeeze on the end and it sticks the glue together as it cools down. Makes them waterproof and burns your fingers. Job's a good one. Now I just need to trim all these and heat shrink them and make them all neat. These here, incidentally, I don't know if you can see on camera, these two that went to the, sorry, not talking to my mic, these two that went to the, that were the fluid levels, yeah, you don't need those. You can just chop those off and get rid of them. They are surplus, they're just going to get in the way, and then we're going to trim all these wires, make them neat. Right, I need to try and keep this in shot and explain what I'm going to do here. So here's a bit of a top tip for you. You've got all these wires and they all need insulating. I've insulated the main live and earth to the pump. These are obviously the ones that are making stuff work, these here. So I've got all these wires that need to be individually insulated. Well, what you can do is, if you start back here somewhere and start cutting them, move down the line, connect the next, cut the next one ever so slightly longer than the one you've just cut. That way you'll end up with a load of wires. See that? You'll end up with a load of wires. Once they're, so I've got my magic glue-filled heat shrink. Are we in shot still? Yeah. Slide that on. Got a load of wires because they're all slightly different lengths. Inserts. Heat shrink over the top of them now. We can't short together. This blow lampy thing. You know, you could individually insulate the end of each one, but what would be the point? The object of the exercise is them not to short together. So we do this, and they can't short together. Unless you cock it up, of course. And then we get, keep this in shot, then we get a bigger piece again. Glue lined heat shrink. Feed everything into the tube. This braid is sometimes difficult to get into. What you end up doing sometimes is just putting some insulation tape around the braid just so it'll slide in, but it's got it. There we go. Heat shrink that Johnny. And then turn the ignition on and find that something doesn't work. Yeah, don't do that. Test it before you put the heat shrink on. What I'm going to do, take the end off this. Turn it into a blow lamp. If you go too near the braid, you'll melt it, so don't do that. And then give that end a bit of a squeeze. So there you go. It's all waterproof. Job done. That can just be cable tied against the body here somewhere. That's it. I think we're done. There's no point in me showing you going it back together. I need to bleed the brakes, but that's just bleed them in the normal way. Nothing complicated there. Put the tank back on. You'll notice, I'm not sure whether it's the case with all the models, but there's a brake failure light that's on constantly on the dashboard. Just take the bulb out, or leave it in and have a red light looking at you, but probably might confuse it with an oil light or something, so don't do that. Just take the bulb out. Your BMW no longer has ABS. It's as simple as that. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one.